Hi everybody. In this video series we're going to show you how to rebuild a Corvette steering box, specifically a solid axle Corvette. This one specifically is out of a 62 Corvette. They're virtually the same for all of the early pre-62 Corvettes, with the exception of the length of that actual steering column portion itself. They're pretty straightforward. We're going to start by taking it apart. I'm going to take this cover off, take off the adjusting screw, take the back plug out, empty the whole entire box, take the shaft out, and then install the new kit. Some of the tools that you guys are going to need to do this, this is a project that you actually can do at home pretty easily. You just need some wrenches, some assorted sockets, bearing race driver kit helps, and then I'll show you some of the special pullers that I've got that will pull the bearing races out of the housing. On top of that, you need a way to clean some parts, so we're going to use some brake cleaner, some rags, some carb cleaner over here in the carb tank, as well as the recirculating parts washer. So the first step is to remove the cross shaft. And in order to remove the cross shaft, we have to pull off this cover, and then you'll be able to turn it and have it come out. So the adjusting, the cross shaft adjuster, or a lot of people call it the sector shaft, is held on by a 5/8 nut. So we'll get that nut out of there. So the cover is held on by 4 1/2-inch bolts and locks, and because this is for a Corvette, you want to make sure that you keep track of all these bolts, because most likely this car will be judged, and we want to make sure that all of the hardware is correct. I've got it mounted in a vise. It's easiest to work on it this way. It's secure. And then I've got a rag here so that when I pop this cover off, it'll hopefully contain a lot of the old nasty gear oil that is inside this box. So I'm just tossing all the hardware into a basket. Then you can just tap this cover off. Okay. And I'll have to grab a screwdriver, but you can take a flat blade screwdriver and actually screw this in, and that'll help unscrew the cover from the adjusting screw. So now you can take your screwdriver, clean out that slot, and screw that adjuster in, and take this cover off. Hopefully you guys can see in the video that this thing has been leaking. It's pretty common for these boxes to leak. When I rebuild them, I usually fill them up with a really light grease. The manual, there's a little needle roller bearing inside there that we'll have to get out of there and replace, but for now I don't like working on really nasty greasy stuff, so I'm going to throw it in the basket and get it cleaned up in the parts washer. Then the adjuster screw can come out, and you don't want to lose this washer. This is a special washer that takes up the slop in the sector shaft. So it slides in there like that and won't slop around, whereas if you forget this washer, then that'll slide in there and be really loose, and then you won't have really good adjustment. So make sure you don't lose that. You need to turn the steering wheel so that that cross shaft lines up with this groove and will actually come out. So come over here and you can see it's going the wrong direction. Now I'm turning it. I went a little too far. So yeah, right. You want to be careful of these threads on this side where the actual pitman arm goes, because you're going to reuse that. You can just use their hammer and pop that out. Now again, I'm going to take this, the cross shaft, and clean it up. So now there's a lock ring here that, let's take a chisel. And knock that lock ring off. So that we can get to this rear plug. This rear plug is never very tight. That's why they have a lock ring, because there's a bearing right here and there's a bearing right here, two tapered roller bearings that support the worm gear for the box. This is an 1 5/16 socket, so a pretty big socket. You can use a big crescent wrench if you don't have a socket this size. So we'll get this cleaned up, and there's an actual bearing race that's pressed down inside here, just like a front wheel bearing. And here's the tapered roller bearing. We have replacements of all these, so I usually just take all the stuff that we know we're going to replace and set it aside. So now the worm gear will come out, and this one we're actually going to replace. They send you a whole new one. This thing's really long. It's a good 4 feet maybe. Yeah, probably a good 4 feet, if not a little bit more. One thing that, a mistake that a lot of people make is that when they rebuild these cars or have them media blasted, they media blast the chassis or whatever, and they usually leave these boxes on, and there is no seal up inside the steering column tube. This tube is pressed into this box, and there is no seal. It sits in the car at kind of an angle like this, so I mean, grease and oil and stuff can't really go uphill, so they didn't really need a seal here. But this shaft, this tube is open where wires come out, and I've actually pulled these apart where this section right up here is completely and totally packed full of sandblast sand and has completely wiped out this bearing, which is pretty crazy because, I mean, these bearings only have like maybe 2 or 3 turns each direction when you're going around a corner. So it's not like these bearings see a lot of RPMs like you would normally see on like a wheel bearing or anything like that, but it was enough to completely wipe out this bearing. So this whole shaft gets replaced. So now I'm going to use a 7/8 deep wall socket. This is just one of my impact sockets to drive that bearing and seal out. Seal shot out. And there's the bearing. You can see the bearing. So we'll set those aside. And essentially, now this steering box housing, with the exception of the filler plug on the top, which just takes a standard wrench to get it out, a 7/16 wrench. This box is empty. There is a race right up in here that you can pull out. They do include it, but it's kind of a pain because you've got to have a special puller that goes all the way down inside here. To save my parts washer, I clean out as much of this old grease as I can. And I'll submerge this whole end after I've got most of the bulk grease out of it in the carb cleaner to dissolve all this stuff and to clean it all up. Now, the upper bearing and horn ring, and it's just a rubber piece that's, so a quick easy way to get that out is take your old steering shaft, put a nut on the end of it, slide it back in the column, and then tap on it until it comes out. These things can be pretty stubborn sometimes, but this is your horn contact. In the upper, there's a bearing inside there that gets really gravelly and nasty. So in the kit, it comes with a new one of these with that wire. So that's how you take that out. Don't lose this either. That's actually goes down into the bearing like that and kind of locks it in around the column. Kind of an upper, you might want to consider it an upper bearing race.